Today's reading is Matthew chapter 13, and we're reading verses 24 to 30 and then 36 to 43. Jesus told them another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like a man who sowed good seed in his field. But while everyone was sleeping, his enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat and went away. When the wheat sprouted and formed heads, then the weeds also appeared. The owner's servants came to him and said, "Sir, didn't you sow good seed in your field? Where then did the weeds come from?" "An enemy did this," he replied. The servants asked him, "Do you want us to go and pull them up?" "No," he answered, "because while you are pulling the weeds, you may uproot the wheat with them. Let both grow together until the harvest. At that time I will tell the harvesters, first collect the weeds and tie them in bundles to be burned. Then gather the wheat and bring it into my barn." And then moving to verse 36. Then he left the crowd and went into the house. His disciples came to him and said, "Explain to us the parable of the weeds in the field." He answered, "The one who sowed the good seed is the Son of Man. The field is the world, and the good seed stands for the people of the kingdom. The weeds are the people of the evil one, and the enemy who sows them is the devil. The harvest is the end of the age, and the harvesters are angels. As the weeds are pulled up and burned in the fire, so it will be at the end of the age. The Son of Man will send out his angels, and they will weed out of his kingdom everything that causes sin and all who do evil. They will throw them into the blazing furnace, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Then the righteous will shine like the sun in the kingdom of their Father. Whoever has ears, let them hear." This is the word of the Lord.
Is this on? Good morning, everybody. My name is Abby, and I will be giving this morning's message. That was a bit of a hard Bible verse, wasn't it? It's a difficult passage to think about. I bet it was a hard one to read, probably a hard one to listen to, and definitely a hard one to preach on. Especially if you're like me, and you get a little bit mixed up and start preparing for the reading that happened last week. And up until Thursday, I thought I was preaching on the parable of the sower. You know, sowing seeds in abandon on different types of ground. And as a pioneer, I loved that verse. It's very exciting and positive towards me. But then I sat down to write and read the actual verse, the parable of the weeds, and started to panic. And I did what probably a lot of people in this church do when they start to panic. I called Mark Rudolph. And he gave some wonderful advice about how to write a message when you're faced with challenging Bible verses, and suggested a few anecdotes and tidbits about this particular parable for me to include. And I mention this because, well, they may or may not be steamboat related. And I don't think I can get away with pretending that they're mine. So, let's talk about weeds. This is one of the times where Jesus tells a parable and then offers an explanation. And it's quite simple in its symbolism. A equals B. The one who sowed the good seed is God. The field is the world. The good seed, or the wheat, is us, the people who love God and follow God. The weeds are the deeds done of the evil one, sown by the enemy. The harvest is the end of the age, and the workers are God's angels. In some translations of the Bible, the good seed is called wheat, and the bad seed is called tares. Now, tares is a specific type of weed that looks a lot like wheat, but it isn't, and it can be really disruptive and difficult to manage. Now, unlike the parable of the sower, where Jesus wants us to identify as the person sowing seeds in the world, in this parable, Jesus wants us to identify as being the seeds. So can you imagine yourself as a little seed? Picked up, by a farmer and placed in a field to grow. Is anyone here a gardener? I was really relieved when I saw Stephen Cope walk in because I know that you're a gardener. So how do you plant seeds? Stick them in the ground? Is that how you do it? Do you kind of close your eyes and just throw them out there? Is that the process? Or how much thought and consideration and hope do you put into each seed? Lots. That's the correct answer. So if I got a handful of seeds, just one that was wheat, one that was cucumber, one was tomatoes, and one was green beans, and just threw it onto the soil, what would happen? Nothing. You wouldn't get a salad. No. Instead of that farmer hurling seeds every which way, here the farmer plants seeds in a field in an organized and meticulous way. There is purpose and hope for growth and harvest. This is Jesus saying to us that God has put us here. God created the earth and created people to live on the earth. We are people in this world with a purpose to grow, and at the end of our days, to be with Him. But in this parable, Jesus also illustrates that there's another force at hand. Now, I don't like fear-based evangelism. It's not who I am to focus on the what will happen if you don't turn to Jesus side of things, because I believe that's not the way to do it. We should focus on the love and light and freedom and grace and beauty and awesomeness that Jesus can bring to your life here and now. Like, why do I call myself a Christian? Why do I profess to follow Jesus? Because of that love that I feel. The freedom, the grace, the beauty, the awesomeness that Jesus brings to my life. I believe God placed me here. I believe God has hopes for me and plans for me. I believe He's watching me grow, and one day there will be glorious peace with Him. Sometimes, perhaps innocently, perhaps naively, we want to think and believe that if you do the right thing, and you work hard, and you have good intentions, you say your prayers, and if you're a good little seed, you won't have to deal with the weeds. But that's not what happens in life, or in today's parable. Like the other day when I was on a canal in my steamboat. The boat wasn't running smoothly, and when the propeller was brought up, there were tons of weeds tangled up. It was unclear. You couldn't see the weeds to avoid them, and the boat struggled to move on and progress properly. There are always weeds. As we grow older, we become more aware of the bad things around us. As our faith grows, we become more aware of the evil spiritual influences that are working in our world, and the water becomes less murky. You can't pretend they aren't there. According to this parable, there is another side, an enemy, and I do believe in that too. Why? Because I see the weeds. And even when I can't see them, I know that they're there because of the pain and the struggles that others go through. And I know about some weeds that exist that are truly evil, the kind of weeds that are painful and uncomfortable to talk about. Weeds. The weeds that shape our faith. If God exists, why does evil things happen? Let's talk about the weeds around us, the weeds that aren't just bad things that happen, not just misunderstandings, but the stuff that affects your faith and your growth. Because let's be honest, it's hard to believe in God when our world has so many hateful people in it, people who murder and kill just for fun, people who orchestrate wars at the expense of other people's lives. Evil weeds. It's hard to believe in God when our prayers against healing, our prayers for healing against such merciless illnesses such as cancer, strokes, and Alzheimer's go unanswered. Disappointment weeds. It's hard to believe in God when there are people who struggle to pay their bills and feed their children, while others earn more money in 10 minutes than their employees will earn in a lifetime. When people profit and put up prices because they can rather than because it's right, greed weeds. It's hard to believe in God when people who profess to believe in Him and follow Him get His teachings twisted and use it as an excuse to hate or shame or exclude. Or when people who profess to serve Him turn into the abusers. It's hard to believe in God when people get addicted to disruptive substances, content, or behaviors. It's hard to believe in God when you look at a newspaper or scroll through the online news articles and just see negative story after negative story about child abuse, global warming, injustice in just about every sector that there is. violence on our streets, abuse of power in government, and the list of weeds goes on and on. In this parable, Jesus is telling us that being a Christian is really hard. Having faith in such a difficult world is hard. We were once seeds and are now growing growing wheat in a field. And we are looked after and tended to by the farmer. But we are surrounded by weeds, placed here intentionally and maliciously by an enemy. And before you know it, everywhere you look, there are weeds, and life seems empty of hope. Seem familiar? Anybody feeling uncomfortable? Because not a lot of people are making eye contact right now. Who wants to leave? Get up and go watch something lighthearted on TV to get out of this funk that we get ourselves into when we think too much about the bad parts of our world. Because I understand it's easier to pretend that evil doesn't exist than to think about God versus evil. How do we have hope? Well, let's go back to the parable, because Jesus doesn't leave us there. He goes on to say about the workers. They spot the weeds, and they ask if they can go pull them up. But the gardener or farmer who started out with a field of healthy soil and a budgeting crop of wheat says no. The weeds must be allowed to stay, because pulling up the weeds is way too dangerous. Better to let the weeds and the wheat grow together and then separate them at harvest time. And it's really symbolic that they both grow together. As the wheat grows, so do the weeds. But Jesus is educating his disciples in this explanation because they are going to see as Jesus' ministry grows, so does the opposition to him. And as we grow in our faith, so does our awareness of the evil and unchristlike actions in the world around us. I know somebody who was a bit of a sideline Christian, went to church at Easter and Christmas, and his family went to church every Sunday, but he'd use that time at church to stay home and get the chores done. And I'm not sure what actually triggered it, but I found out that he'd signed up to join an Alpha course, and it was going well. But then suddenly he was falsely accused of inappropriate behavior at work and nearly lost his job. Even when the accusations were proved false and he was reinstated, his reputation at the company was tarnished and the trust was gone. And he was so aware of the spiritually negative things that he had gone through. As the wheat grows, so do the weeds. But this farmer, the gardener, the Christ figure, did not leave his fields to die. He did not tear up the field and start again, or throw out the wheat for the sake of the weeds, or abandon the wheat to be consumed by the weeds. He won't tear out the weeds because what he is growing is good. We are growing, and we are good. He saw what he had made and said that it was good, right? He instructs his workers to protect the wheat, and when the time is right, to collect it in for him. He continues to oversee, and then the righteous will shine like the sun in the kingdom of their Father. All the time, growing next to the weeds did not diminish its value. The tiny seed was planted, it grew and was collected in at the time of harvest. When we love God and when we trust God, we can continue to grow no matter what is going on around us. And God has promises for us for the end of our times. All that is hope for the future. Don't get me wrong. I believe we can make a difference here on earth, and some of those weeds we spoke about earlier deserve our actions. Some of those weeds we are called to actively reject and overcome. But our time next to the weeds, or battling weeds, does not take away from our value and our place with God. In this parable, Jesus tells us that we have been planted with purpose by God, that we are loved, there is a plan and purpose for us. Jesus also educates us and prepares us with the knowledge that there is an enemy who works against you, but you are still being cared for by God. You can grow and grow, live in hope and knowledge of the day that one day you will be collected for an eternal peace with God. And we have that hope for a peaceful future, the type of peace you'd find when you're cruising along in a steamboat. I was going to skip the bit where he describes what happens to the weeds. Mostly because I feel like I don't have the authority or perhaps the knowledge to stand here and preach on any sort of heaven and hell narrative. The love and life and saving grace of Jesus is what I run towards. And I don't think we should focus on what we're running away from, but focus on what we are running to. But I think it is important to say that this is a parable, and parables are stories which make a point. It was spoken to a people in a certain context in time, and Matthew, when he was writing, was writing for a certain group. So the bit about what happens to the weeds, the bit about the burning and weeping and gnashing of teeth. First of all, gnashing of teeth is a bit of a trigger for somebody who's got a baby who's teething. But how do we take this in today's context? I think it's a reminder that we are not the judge in the world. It's not up to us what happens at the end of our days. But for the truest of evil, there will be judgment and consequences. How can you believe in God when there's such evil things going on in the world? Well, I believe in God because I have hope in hope. But I also have hope that one day evil will have to answer for what it's done. Although evil and suffering is persistent in the world, Jesus reassures us that we can have peace in Him in the midst of life difficulties. And ultimately, we have the assurance of eternal peace with Him. One thing we're guaranteed in life is difficulties and pain and suffering, but only those who have trusted in Jesus can have the peace that is that this is. So I'd like to finish this morning by leaving you with some words from 2 Corinthians, chapter 4, verses 16 to 18. Sorry, it was a bit of a heavy one, wasn't it? So this is why I wanted to end on something. Therefore we do not lose heart. Even though our outward man is perishing, yet the inward man is being renewed day by day. For our light affliction, which is but for a moment, is working for us a far more exceeding and eternal weight of glory, while we do not look at things which are seen, but the things which are not seen. For the things which are seen are temporary, but the things which are not seen are eternal.